Hello, welcome to Yoga with Dasha. I am Dasha, and today we're doing a prenatal yoga sequence. This is a half an hour class, half an hour flow sequence for anyone who's got a baby in their belly, or you might just be curious about prenatal yoga. So this is for you. We'll start seated. So in the beginning here, you're just finding your breath, you're finding a comfortable seated shape. So the way that I'm sitting here may not be for everyone. In fact, even for me, I can sit this way, but not for too long, because I do have some pelvic girdle pain, and with that, I'll definitely give you some suggestions for that. So sitting cross-legged may not always be the best way. For me, it feels okay for a short amount of time, but I won't be staying there long. So in the beginning here, I'm just moving for my shoulders, for my neck, simple movements, starting to drop into your body. Every time you release your chin to chest, you can remind yourself there's a little being there in your belly, practicing with you. Baby may be asleep right now, but they have a certain amount of consciousness, a certain amount of awareness of everything you're doing. And a lot of the poses we'll be doing are meant to also get the baby in the right position. So that's a really big part of prenatal yoga as well. So here you can take your arms out to your sides and just hold the arms up there for a few moments, finding your breath, finding the length in your back. That general posture is still very important here, as it is in regular yoga. And then eventually reaching overhead, really finding the length of the top. A few moments there with your breath. And then slowly release. Your arms, hands come together near your heart. So if you like, you can stay still longer here. You can spend a little longer with your breath, with your baby. Or you can start to come to some movement. So a really nice place to start is Sufi grinds, it's called. So these big circles from the hips, you're leaning over to one side, going all the way around, and just continuing at your pace. Make sure there's space for the belly as you move. So you might slightly adjust how you're sitting. You can stay cross-legged, or you can extend your legs out to a wide-legged shape. And just going one way and then slowly making your way in the other direction. Long spine throughout this movement. And just with your breath, taking your baby for a ride. Rocking the baby. Warming up your back. From there, bring your hands over your knees so your arms are relatively straight, and we'll do some of these spinal flexes, right? Spinal flexing here. So as you inhale, you bring your chest forward. As you exhale, you round. But continue to really prioritize that opening, and when you round, make sure it still feels like there's space for the baby and for the belly. So it's safe to round here, but just move in a way that really feels flowing. It feels like there's no pinching anywhere, and just continue with your breath, one movement. If you feel lightheaded, slow down a little or look ahead at one point. And in the end here, you are slowing down a bit more. You might hold either of these shapes. This is kind of a cat-cow movement, right? You can hold one or the other for a bit, take at least a couple of breaths in the center, and then make your way to some twists. So you can either do dynamic twisting from one side to the other, or you can hold the twist, but no more than 5 breaths. So everything we do in prenatal yoga, we don't hold too long, unless you're in a restorative type setup, right? Unless you're in a very supportive reclined shape, we don't hold for too long. Just a few breaths on each side. Noticing how that feels for the back, for your neck, your shoulders. You can look behind you or to the side. And try to twist from the center of the body and even more in the chest rather than from the belly, right? So if you are used to twisting really deeply in your regular practice, now is the time for you to start to twist in a slightly different way, to not go to that complete edge and to not twist the actual belly too much here. From there, we'll do this kind of swimming movement. So you find your length in the beginning and then you start to dive forward. It's a beautiful meaning to this movement as well, right? So you're leaping forward into this movement. You're allowing yourself to dive in, and at the top you're kind of bringing yourself back together, right? So it's a very vulnerable movement in a way. And physically it is nice to warm up the back this way, the arms, the shoulders, and then you can take your arms out to your sides afterward, bring the chest forward, and just take a few deep, complete breaths. Make sure you move slowly as you transition from here to all fours, so that hands and knees position on the mat. And again, some cat-cow movement here, or you might do circles for your hips. So as one of my teachers, Teresa, refers to this intuitive play. Intuitive play is what we encourage here. So intuitively moving in a way that feels good, in a way that your body is asking for, thinking of that baby once again going for a ride there, just enjoying some rhythmic movement. And these are things that you learn now that you can later use in labor, right? So it's really a beautiful practice to start to think about what might be a good tool for you to use, what feels like a good position, and this all fours shape definitely is, for a lot of women, a wonderful position to be laboring in. So from here you might release down to child's pose. Of course, in our case, where we'll be taking the knees quite far apart, right, wider than you would in the usual class. You're giving space to the belly, to the baby. Try to encourage diaphragmatic breathing here, so you feel the breath on the sides of the body and even a bit into the back. And you might stay there longer, or you might try this variation, the knees to chest, it's called sometimes. So you're stacking your hands under your head. Toes can be tucked or untucked. This is in many ways, this is also a variation of papier pose in yoga. This is in many ways one of those poses, probably the main pose I hear about from different birth workers, OBGYNs, doulas, midwives, as a really steady, supported, nice, relaxed shape for the pelvis to be in and for the back. So it's a nice shape to spend time in. So you might stay there longer, or you might make your way into downward facing dog. This is of course a little more challenging. Again, you're stepping just a little wider. You're bending the knees definitely in prenatal yoga, bending the knees at least a little bit. So you're really allowing that whole body stretch, and you're making sure you transition in a mindful way as well. So you're always giving space, always moving in these mindful ways, and coming up through a squat. So a halfway squat here is really nice, reaching at the top, and you saw that I was rolling up, right? So the head is the last thing to come up. So we'll do a bit more of that movement. So making your way into a halfway squat. You might even do some cat-cow movement here. Your hands can come to your thighs, or you can keep your hands into your chest or reach overhead, and eventually coming up again through that rolling movement. And so this is modified sun salutation. So instead of sun salutation A, B, or C, this is what we do. This is the smart way to move, to prepare for labor. So not only moving in a way that feels good now, but that actually prepares the body. So you can release down to a deep squat. However, if like me, you have pelvic girdle pain, you may not spend a lot of time here, or you may even skip this pose altogether. Stay in a halfway squat. If you're 34 weeks and over and your baby's breech, stay in a halfway squat as well. Do not go into a deep squat. So that is only if you're 34 weeks and over and your baby's breech. A couple of other complications can make it that the deep squat is not great, so the SPD, right, and any other pelvic type pain or any kind of separation. Be mindful of that. And in this version, we're now moving into all fours again, right, except it's a part of the flow. So you can go straight there without the deep squat. You can go to all fours from the halfway squat. Just move one side at a time. So one hand comes down to the ground, that same side, knee, and then the other. And then again, playing with what you want. So you might do child's pose. You might go to downward facing dog. Continuing to pay attention to the back of your legs. And if you're walking up at all, make sure you're either moving through all fours again, or you're walking up in such a way that your feet are a little wider than hips distance, eventually rolling up through a halfway squat, reaching at the top. And slowly release your hands to chest. Take a few breaths here, just being upright, now that you're a bit more warmed up. And then release your arms. So we will do a few standing poses here. You can start with either side. We'll start with some hip openers with Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2. So either stepping back with your right foot or your left. You can kind of slide the foot along the mat so you're supported all the way there. In this case, I'm still taking a pretty deep stance, but you can definitely step in closer. Again, SPD, pelvic girdle pain, a few different things can make it so that your hips are not as stable feeling. So you can definitely shorten the stance. You can flow in and out of the shape here. It can be nice to flow, thinking of fluidity, thinking of how your baby's swimming in all that amniotic fluid right now. And then when you go to reverse warrior here, you're not actually shifting back too much. It's not a deep back bend as you might see in regular yoga classes. You're just introducing a bit of an opening, spending a couple of breaths there, and then going to extended side angle pose. Again, this is the lowest, the deepest I would take this pose. You might even stay a bit more upright. You might have your back foot against the wall for some more support, but you're not reaching down to the ground. You're not reaching down to the block. You're staying in this version, breathing here. So the belly still has space. Nothing is being compressed in the back or in the front. It's the same thing for the other side, starting with that length, that openness of Warrior 2, maybe staying still or flowing. I'm thinking here of really strengthening everything, reminding yourself you're not fragile. You may feel like it some days, but this is nice and energizing, strengthening. And you need that right now as well. So going through reverse warrior, again, not a deep bend by any means, and same with extended side angle pose. This is the deepest I would suggest going. You may do different things with the top arm though, may try a couple of different variations, but not going too much deeper than this, and maybe even shortening the stance a little bit more. And then coming back to the center. Come out of these poses slowly, stepping in, taking the time for your hips. You might do some circles now for your hips. So making sure that the joints are never spending too long in any kind of static shape where they may be just at their very end range of motion. We don't want that. So just introducing a bit of movement. And here we're going into tree pose. So while in normal yoga, I'm showing here very momentarily, in a normal class, you might bring that foot into the thigh. Here, most likely, that's going to start to feel too deep, right? Both for the pelvis, for the hips. You see, I can't stand there long, and there's a reason for that, right? So bringing the foot into the standing leg under the knee is likely going to be better now that if you are in the second to third trimester. So not only is your balance challenged from relaxin, that wonderful hormone that's making the body very lax. But also, everything is just shifting and there's a lot of added weight, right? So even just that alone makes balancing a lot more challenging. So you can do all of this against the wall if you like, having one hand on the wall. And yeah, just not going to those deepest variations is likely going to be best. So again, only a few breaths. We're really not here for too long. This is enough to introduce the pose, to really spend a bit of time there, but we don't need to go deeper because there's a possibility of overstretching and introducing injury. The body is already very flexible right now. So for this next part, we'll do a bit more standing movement. So you can set up for a high lunge, a low lunge, or warrior one, staggering your feet back foot at 45 degrees. Warrior one will likely feel the most stable, that and the low lunge. In the high lunge here, you see my back leg is straight. However, you may feel better having that knee a little bit more bent. You can also go to this diagonal variation. So you are lowering a few inches and then holding there. This gives more space to the back. It is challenging for the core. So even though you're not actively engaging the core, it is working the core. And this is a revolved variation. Now this is, again, the deepest I would go. And even then, I would only be there for a very short amount of time. It may feel better for a lot of you to stay much more upright. Right? So because I'm used to binding and all kinds of deeper variations in my regular practice, this to me is already, 60 to 70% of my edge, which is what we want. However, from there, I would pull back even more if you're not used to really deep variations, right? So I wouldn't go there at all, and I would just stay more upright, especially later on in the pregnancy. So just a gentle upright twist, or even staying in the center. I'm showing a couple of other things here you can do within this pose, such as clasping your elbows behind your back or your hands. And again, that back knee can be softened. It all depends on how your back is feeling, how your hips are feeling, and how long you're spending there. You see here that using the block does make this accessible. And you don't have to reach the top arm to the ceiling. You can keep it on the thigh. And there is space for my belly there, but you have to also think of your back and your hips, your SI joints, right? So, and more upright twist is completely okay here as well. And so you see here I'm coming out in those little steps instead of a big leap, and kind of sliding the back foot forward, and then a little bit of movement for the hips. Some standing hips, standing twists can be nice here as well. And just shaking things out, moving around for a moment, again making sure the body always has a bit of a break before you go to the next thing. So we'll do some balances here, some standing balances, starting with warrior 3. And again, thinking of that 60 to 70% edge, I am, once again, in this whole sequence, I am taking it to just about the deepest variation that I would suggest. So this, for many of you, may already be too deep, right? So you could pull back from there. You can use blocks. You can bring your hands to a wall in front of you instead of fully lowering down. But as in a regular yoga class, I still want you to think about lowering with length. So instead of rounding first and then lifting the back leg, try to think of it as a seesaw. Try to think of everything moving together. And these are the different arm variations you can do within here. Just make sure you're not introducing too much of a curve into your back one way or another. So it's not a back bend, it's not really a forward bend. And then just coming back to center. Here I'm doing a palm tree pose. So again, it depends on how your balance has been, how you feel with your heels lifted off the ground like this and the whole body staying in a long line. This is quite challenging to stay here for a while. So if it's too much, you can always just release the heels back down instead of staying lifted. And the bending is optional too, right? So the bending makes it that much more challenging, and you're only bending a little bit. You're not going any deeper than this. You're keeping the belly right at the front where it belongs, right? So it's not being twisted. You're not introducing any back bending. You're just moving slowly and with control. And then when your heels are back on the ground, take a moment here just to breathe. You might stay still, you might move, but you're just resetting for a moment before you make your way down to the mat, to seated poses. You might play with your balance, so shifting. So here now my feet are completely connected to the ground. You're shifting forward and back, side to side. In a normal class, I would encourage people to close their eyes. Here, however, I would say keep your eyes gently open, unless you're very, very confident in your balance that day. And just notice how it feels to shift your weight. So when you make your way to the mat, we'll transition again in that way through a squat. So inhale, reach. Exhale, make your way into a halfway squat. From here, you might be going into a deep squat, or you might be going straight to the ground through all fours. If you're in a deep squat, when you come out of it, reach to the ground first, so you have that support there, and then sit down. From there, you might do a very, very gentle chest opener here, not a big back bend. You might do some windshield wiper type movement for your hips, or some really gentle, small twists, right? So we're remembering small twists from the upper body rather than from the belly, from the lower back. And the more you give space in the body, the better this will serve you. So we're setting up for staff pose, Dandasana. Now, your feet may be close together, or they might be further apart. So you want space for the belly. Because I'm sitting on a block, I felt here that I could have my feet close together, and I still felt okay there. But definitely, you can have your feet apart. And the more important part is that you're bringing your toes toward you, you're bringing your feet toward you. So you're stretching those calf muscles, which are probably getting tight, right? I know for me in my pregnancy, I've woken up in the night a few times with tight calves, and that was a real surprise. It was a real wake-up call, something I have not experienced before. So you are just there again a little while, not too long. You can do a chest opener just gently, right? Not thinking of a deep full back bend. And you can stay just upright. So feel the stretch into the back of the legs. Breathe into the stretch. Now in these poses we can be here again about 5 to at most 7 breaths, not too long. These are complete full breaths. Butterfly pose is a wonderful pose in prenatal yoga. So you can have your feet close to you, but it may be that you'll feel better with your feet further away into more of a diamond shape. I know I generally do these days. And you can be going forward a little, but again, not a deep bend at all. And you're leading with your chest. So your back, if you saw me from the side right now, your back is actually staying relatively straight. So you're not rounding too much within it. And then you're making sure your knees are comfortable, your hips are comfortable. I'm still sitting up on a bit of support here on a block. You can be straight on the ground or on a block or a bolster or a pillow. And then just using your breath to allow the hips to fall open, and thinking here of the time that your baby will be entering the world. You'll want to be able to relax, right? To open, to help that baby make their way here. So, realistically, I recently heard about an OBGYN talking about how a baby is too big to for, generally a baby is too big for the woman's hips. That's why all of those body changes happen, right? All of that relaxing, working its magic, and things like prenatal yoga can be very helpful in just starting to visualize the fact that you are capable of doing this, and your baby will not be too big for you, that your body knows what it's doing. That's why all of these beautiful, meaningful changes are happening. And you're able to relax within that, breathe within that. And when you come out of this pose, make sure to shake out a little, feel your legs move around. And next we'll go to a wide-legged pose. So you can still be sitting on some support if you like. Just make sure you're tilting your pelvis forward slightly. You can sit on the ground if you prefer. You can really gently go forward. However, I would make it very subtle. Otherwise, you can do these side body opening type movements here. And again, I'm not going too deep. Normally, I'd be able to go quite a bit deeper, but I just know that I do not need to here, so that's what I encourage you to do as I share my practice with you. Do not go to the 100% edge, just go to that place where you can feel the stretch, you can feel the opening, but it's not quite so deep. And you can look up or you can look ahead here, whichever feels best for your neck. You'll see I'm bringing my toes toward me to continue to stretch for the back of the legs a little as well. And even just staying in the center, coming back to the breath, coming back to the quality, the duration, the temperature of the breath. You can do that here, coming out of the pose slowly. And again, either windshield wiper movement. This is not very different from my regular practice in that sense. I like to do these release type movements after holding certain poses. When you lie down, so your side is better, and when you get to the ground, you can do some happy baby pose here. Again, not for too long, and you have your knees very wide so the belly has some space. And then from there we'll do bridge variations. And that happy baby is optional. We just did it in order to give some length to the back again. So bridge pose, you may not even fully lift the hips this way. You may, as in regular bridge, you might try all these variations. Or you might do some pelvic tilts, right? Keeping your back very much on the ground and just tilting your pelvis toward you, working with your pelvic floor. Physiotherapists often suggest that one in pregnancy. Or even just doing simple Kegels here in that shape. Another thing you can do though is a supported bridge pose, and that's what I'm setting up for here. I have a video on this channel about how to set it up. So the most important thing is that you're finding that sacrum bone, finding your sacrum, right, rather than your lower back. So the block is not actually under the lower back, it is under the sacrum, that triangular bone below the lower back. And here you can, honestly, you could end here. You could rest here for quite a while and then just eventually come out of this variation and lie down on your back. Not for long. In pregnancy, lying down on your back is not really encouraged for long periods of time later on in pregnancy, so you can lie down on your side instead after a few breaths. You can set up for a twist. So here I'm showing a good way to get into a reclined twist. So opening to twist from the chest rather than bringing your legs over from being on your back. Right, so the twist, you can even see here, if you look closely, you can see that my twist is mostly in my upper body. It's not actually my belly. My belly is mostly still on the same side. You can have even more support within the twist or do a variation that's entirely restorative focused. Again, I have a video on this channel for that, showing you how you can set up such support for a restorative twist. It looks quite different to this, but has similar purpose. And yeah, again, just decide how you would like to end the class. You can end it in a wide-legged child's pose. You can end it lying down, most likely on your side, maybe briefly on your back. And then eventually when you come up, make sure you're coming up through something like tabletop again. You're moving slowly, you're not just standing straight up, you're rolling up. And just really taking your time. I hope you enjoyed this sequence. I hope to have you become a member of this community. Lots more coming to you in terms of prenatal yoga. And I wish you the most amazing pregnancy, the most amazing experience bringing your baby into the world, and to enjoy this time. Thank you for sharing it with me. Namaste.